I'm Lisa Fairman, and we are here today to discuss The Redemption of the Bride, God's Redeeming Love for His Covenant People by Lynda Cherry, who is an amazing author and historian. And we have Charla and Marilyn, our book editors, who are here also to discuss this with us. So Lynda, I have to ask, what prompted you to write this book?
Well, it's really interesting. I began reading the Bible when I was 9 years old, and I just really loved it. And I was kind of a voracious Bible reader and started at the beginning with the Old Testament. And I remember when I came across Jesus or Jehovah describing himself as a husband, I was kind of taken aback. I never, ever imagined him as a husband. And then later was reading him referring to his people as his bride. And I just was really puzzled by it, honestly, but really taken with it because I could feel the emotion of the words of the Lord as he described himself as a husband, especially in both the books of Jeremiah and Isaiah. And so as I became older, it became a particular focus of study for me. And I started looking for any book that I could that would help me to understand those symbols better and understand where that was coming from. The books that I read, they were great and they kind of helped point me in the right direction, but I never could quite find one book that carried all the information that I was looking for. So for example, I read a number of rabbinical books that helped me to understand that the Jewish people had taught that what happened at Mount Sinai when Moses and his people received the law was actually a betrothal to Jehovah with a wedding yet to come. And I was just really touched by that. And so I kept again looking for books over all of these years. And I kept thinking, I just wish there was a book that had all of the details combined. Mm-hmm. And then I have to admit that I was kind of taken aback when I felt one day the Spirit whispered to me, you're the person to write that book. And the truth is, I've been writing this book for more than 20 years because it's a daunting task. As I read about the Lord's emotional, deep, loving feelings for his people. And I was able to start seeing this story from its beginning to the prophesied end as we read it in the book of Revelation. I was overcome. And I just thought, who am I to write this and try to describe how much God loves us? It's just simply so intimate. So it's taken quite a while. It's been a deeply profound experience for me. It's changed my life.
Oh, it's amazing.
That's one of the things that happened for me. When I read this, it started becoming really intimate. He became so much closer to me because of what you've talked and all the steps. And it was like, oh my goodness, it was lovely. So I really like it.
Definitely, to me, was a love story. So it's just written, The Redemption of the Bride was just written so beautifully as a love story to just really to express God's feelings towards his people and the promises and covenants that we have. And I just loved how you wove the scriptures in and out of it. And I felt reading it, I was like, oh, this is poetry. And it was interesting because it's the scriptures, but the way that it was woven in with your text was beautiful. I also have to say, I mean, out of the books I have read, this is one of the most well-researched book. Mm-hmm. Your footnotes are impressive. And so I just love that because it's so authentic and you have all the sources there to back you up. I'm sure this must have taken you a long time to do the research.
It has taken a long time. Like I said, it's more than a 20-year journey for me. And I have to say, in terms of that love story, because that's what really struck me as well, I think it's interesting to research and ponder each of the titles that the Lord uses for himself. For example, he calls himself the shepherd. He calls himself the stone of stumbling. He's the Lion of Judah. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it was like, well, why is he calling himself a husband? Mm-hmm. And what am I supposed to be learning from that? And again, that sense of the bond that he wants for us, the only way it could be described is in a marriage bond, that is how committed he is to us. And in fact, far more committed. He himself points it out in the book of Isaiah. He's far more committed than any other mortal husband is. In fact, yeah, Marilyn, you had
said...
Well,
I was going to say the tragedy is that we're juxtaposed against his faithfulness and our unfaithfulness. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was the thing that was so tragic, for lack of a better way of saying it. Here is this person who loves infinitely purely, constantly, is always there, always faithful. And yet Israel, the bride, we individually, that's the beautiful way that you wove in each time that you're reading the redemption of the bride. It's kind of like you can put yourself in as the picture of the bride. You can put yourself in as a single person, as an individual. You can put yourself in as a church. You can put yourself in as a covenant person, people, no matter what it is, and the covenant people. And that kind of made me realize, and it was frustrating to see how often Israel or they left the covenant. I mean, they kept breaking it over and over again. And he was constantly calling out, trying to get his bride to come back. And as I said, as I had thought before, I always thought that this was kind of dealing with the book of Hosea. But in the end, it was all of the books, but specifically Isaiah. And Isaiah is such a difficult book to read. But because you were able to weave in so many different scriptures and start to show different relationships, but they are all relationships. They're all, whether we're the bride or the daughter or the sister or whatever it was, and we're close relationships. And we were rebelling against, sinning, going against it. And we were taking what would be the most precious, that sacred relationship that a husband and wife would be, and throwing it aside. And he was out, with, as you've said in your book, and the scriptures are often there. And that's the beauty of it, is that he will remember us. He isn't giving us a bill of divorcement. He isn't forgetting us. He is always there. He's the faithful husband. But I could see my own, sins, that he said, I'll take care of it. I'll drink the cups. I'll do all of this. And so I felt it was a beautiful way of showing our position, his faithfulness, and our love of him. As I read it, my love just increased more and more for him.
Yeah. Had you noticed before in the scriptures how often it tells that one of the consequences of straying away from this marriage covenant with Jehovah is that it will say the voice of the bridegroom ceases. Mm-hmm. And I had never really fully comprehended that until I started this study, that really the consequence is that we don't want to hear his voice. Mm-hmm. And so he stops speaking. Yeah. But as you say, in Hosea actually was one of the books that really inspired me as well, is that he waits for his bride. In that book, it talks about him following after. He sees his bride going into secret dens with other lovers. And the word Baal, which is often used for false worship, and it was the name of a god in ancient times, means husband. That word, Baal, means husband. And so in other words, Christ's or Jehovah's covenant people were actually going after false husbands, which is why he calls it adultery. Mm-hmm. And so he follows after, in the book of Hosea, he follows after, waiting for her to remember. And at one point in the book of Hosea, it says that she remembers and she thinks to herself, it was better for me when I was with my first husband. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting to me is at that moment that he goes then to redeem her. A lot of times we think it's going to be so much work to turn our hearts back. But the moment we remember, the moment we call out to him, he is there. And in that same book, Hosea, he talks about that then he takes her to the valley of hope. Oh. And he teaches her there to sing again as she had sung in her maidenhood. And for me, that is the whole point of the plan of salvation, is that he is following, he is waiting for us to make the choice. And then his whole goal is to redeem and restore us and to make us something better than we had ever imagined we could be, to lift us up and to raise us up. It's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that.
I loved all of the symbolism throughout too, and especially the feminism symbolism throughout. And the woman clothed with the sun, for example, I personally love the sun. So, so the woman clothed with the sun was just such a beautiful analogy. And I just loved all of that, how you wove that all into the story. And it's wonderful to see that brought in as at first glance, people might assume with the Bible that it's written more for men, but that there is so much beauty. It was beautiful.
Feminine beauty.
Feminine
Thank you.
beauty.
Yes. In fact, that was something that I've heard my whole life, is that women felt left out, that they felt that men were speaking to God and that God was speaking to men, and it seemed that to them that all the stories were about men. But the truth is that he uses feminine symbols throughout. And I feel like he's using those symbols to, first of all, show us how precious women are, but also to measure covenant faithfulness. For example, in Isaiah, when you read about the daughters of Zion who are mincing and prancing, he is talking about his people, men and women, and that he is fearful that they have gone off the path. And then, as you say, the woman clothed with the sun, that's also my favorite symbol, because that is the symbol of men and women in the fullness of their exalted stature. And so I've actually gotten a little giggle out of it, to tell you the truth, as friends who are men have said, oh, thinking of myself as a bride. And again, I think it's a little bit ironic. And I think that's those things that sometimes make us feel a little bit uncomfortable. Some of those symbols that the Lord is using, I think they're good for us to kind of dig into. But the point being, one last thing on that feminine symbolism, and that this is a sign of the covenant that both men and women are equal before him, is the whole invitation to covenant in the first place. That's in Exodus 19:5-6. The Lord says, I will make you a kingdom of priests. And that word kingdom comes from the Hebrew mamlaka, which is a feminine word. And then he's also using this beautiful feminine language. I carried you to me on eagle's wings, and you will be a peculiar treasure to me, is really saying you are my one and only. So we have seeing both genders mixed here in this invitation and promise.
The other thing I loved about it too was all of the beautiful Jewish symbolism and traditions throughout. And I just have to say, it must have taken a lot of research. And I wondered what, you talked about the Jewish people as your beloved ancestry and all of our beloved ancestry. And I just wondered what has brought you to your love of the Jewish faith and condition.
I have to say that I seem to have been born with that, and actually then went into Jewish studies. And I've just had such a longing for the unification with the Jewish people. And then particular reverence and respect and gratitude for what they have preserved for us. And they have preserved so much for us. The Bible is through the Jews. Jesus is a Jew. And all of these traditions, every single one of them was rich with symbolism to help us to learn not only more about God, but more about ourselves. If we contemplate what the bride is and the woman clothed with the sun, that helps us to have a deeper understanding of ourselves as well. And so I really appreciate the Jewish people and all that they preserved for us. And I hope that we can kind of bind these things together and have more of a mutual understanding and respect for one another.
Yes.
I think Marilyn and I both really liked the cups that came out in the Passover. And for Marilyn just talked about how she loved that, but I loved, I will bring you out. And when you're talking about it, it's my husband doing that. It's like, whoa. Or I will deliver you again. And then the last one, I will take you to me. Wow. It is so personal. I really hope that all of the men can read this and go, okay, this is a personal relationship, and I want this kind of relationship with the Lord. And I loved how you put it into the tabernacle, and then you, even in your book, put it out and said, here's what happened in the tabernacle, and here's why the Jews did it, and here's what it means, and here's what it means to come closer and closer and closer to Christ, to the bride. This bridegroom.
Bridegroom. In fact,
I'm the bride.
Some Jews actually refer to the Holy of Holies as the bride chamber of Jehovah.
Right. Yeah. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. I love that.
Well, I think so often we think of it as the Passover is just that small amount of time when they are in Egypt and they're being taken out. And yet it's an eternal symbol. And I think that, the third cup, I will redeem you, is so, as even in Isaiah, as he's talking about I was wounded. I have bled. I have done all of these things for you, that I'm going to drink the bitter cup. I'm going to drink it to the dregs. And it was beautifully, in the redemption of the bride, it is showing how much Jehovah will do for us that we never recognized. The fact that he atoned for everything and cleaned us so that we could become a new bride, just like in Hosea, that he says, I'll prepare you to sing again. And I feel like the cups are each of us have to drink from different cups, but the different steps to come unto him. But he enables us. Everything that he does is so that we can come back and participate. And I loved what you had written about Rebecca and Isaac. I think it's a beautiful way of the Jewish traditions telling us how they had done betrothals. And the betrothals, we don't see it in our modern day. And so a lot of these symbols are lost to us. And I think you resurrected them for us.
Oh, I'm so glad. I do love those ancient wedding customs and how they pertain to Jesus Christ and to us as his people, or the children of Israel, which of course I want to emphasize, Israel is the name of God's covenant family, and it's not dependent upon bloodline. All are invited to become part of that covenant family of Israel. But the sense of that anciently a friend of the bridegroom was appointed to take the proposal to the bride and her family. And with that, he would also take gifts from the bridegroom to the bride. And so we see that in Abraham's servant, when he goes to Rebecca, that he takes these jewelry to her, and invariably it also included wedding finery that the bride would wear on her wedding day. And it's really important for us to understand, especially as we kind of see this in many different levels. This is believed by the Jews to have happened at Mount Sinai, with Moses acting the role of the friend of the bridegroom, and that he is offering treasure and gifts to the bride, and we see it personified in the temple clothing of the priests, specifically the golden headband that said holiness to the Lord. Invariably in ancient custom, amongst that treasure, the bride would construct a headband with the coins that had been given to her. And she would wear that headband with the coins on her wedding day. And that was supposed to represent how much her prospective groom loved her. And then the same with the clothing. And so we see that carried out with Abraham's servant to Rebecca. We also see that it's always a free will option on the part of the bride, just like it's a free will option for us now to accept the covenant or not. Rebecca was allowed to say, yes, I'm going to go across the desert, or no, I don't want to do this. And just as Moses asked the people at Mount Sinai, will you enter this covenant? And what's really touching to me is that they all said yes. They thought, they meant it, they really wanted, they were willing, but they weren't ready. And so that's why the teachings of the rabbis are that it was a betrothal with a wedding still to take place. And that wedding is believed to be associated with the second coming of the Lord and the great wedding supper of the Lord. And so it's something that we are all looking forward to. All of the children of Israel are looking forward to that, and hoping that the bride will finally be ready.
The friend of the bridegroom, Moses, is going up on Mount Sinai. And what is the first thing? He gives him the word. He writes it down. And so all of this is the most, he says, I am the word. The word was made flesh. All of these different things. They give him the word. Moses comes down, sees these people who are worshiping other gods, which is fornication, adultery. He's brought them out to sanctify them, to do everything that they can. They do it. But in the time that he's gone, they desecrate all of the gold and the things that were supposed to be the jewels and things to take care of the bride. But the most important the most important gift was the words. And that's what you have put all throughout this book, is the word. The word is the most important.
It really shows us the emotional depth of the Lord. Some people have said to me that they feel like the Bible is all about God being angry. For me, it's quite the opposite. When he talks about, leave me to weep, I will not cease weeping for the breach of the daughter of my people. There again, we have that feminine symbol representing all of the people of Israel and his incredible love for them. It reminds me very much of what the small vision we have in Moses 7 of Enoch seeing God weeping. But really, The Old Testament, and especially Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, are full of God weeping over his people. And he will do anything and everything to reclaim them and heal them.
I'm going to bring up one more cup. I loved it in chapter 8. You talked about the 4 cups of coming to him, but then when we've turned away, my goodness, when we've turned away, he gives us another cup. He says, it's a cup of justice. You'll feel a little bit of it, but I'm going to drink the drag. So I will take justice. I just love that. It was so amazing for me, so personal.
It's the bitter cup he partook of.
Right.
In the book of Ezekiel, it tells us that this cup of justice that each of us would deserve is so awful. It's like acid and burning that we would clutch at our chest and at our skin as we drank it.
Yeah.
And in the book of Isaiah, he says, thou shalt no more drink of it again. I will take it out of your hands. But because it is the cup of justice, it has to be drained.
Yeah.
And that's the bitter cup that he partook of for us.
The other thing I really appreciated too in the redemption of the bride, that there is a sense of reverence, that you include all different areas of Christianity and Judaism throughout. So there's definitely a reverence there and appreciation for all faiths as they read this book. And I just think it is such a beautiful love story, the redemption of the bride.
Thank you for that. And I hope that that does come across, because that final chapter of the book of Revelation, and it's the final chapter of the book as well, where John looks into heaven as he sees the celestial city come down, and he says, behold the bride, and she is glorious. And in that case, it's represented both as a city and as a people. And John suddenly hears this chorus of people, chorus of all those who have been redeemed, saying, and John quotes it, he says, the Spirit and the bride say, come and partake of the waters of life. Come. And at the end, John, who is overcome, says, even so, Lord Jesus, come. And to me, that's sort of the ultimate statement of the bride, and the ultimate statement that I'm hoping that all people will feel, because this is what John saw in his revelation. He saw all of God's children as being so precious. This is not, again, just a DNA group. These are anyone who will come unto him. And so, yes, I'm grateful that love and respect for others came through, and I hope that they can feel that as they read this invitation. That's another reason why I chose this particular picture with the hand outstretched, is that the message is, come unto him, He is faithful, and he will heal us, and he will redeem us.
Beautiful.
So where can somebody get this book? Because it's amazing. I ordered mine.
It's available at cedarfort.com, my great publisher, and also on Amazon. It's also at Barnes & Noble as well.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Lynda. We really appreciate your time today to share your story of this amazing love story of the redemption of the bride. Thank you.
Thank you.